A national title game matchup between a program that is recently the losingest in college football against a former juggernaut, but that was 25 years ago. Indiana, once forlorn, they're the unbeaten top-seeded favorite. Miami, the reborn powerhouse, they're the 10th seed underdog, but they're playing at home. This is the College Game Day podcast. I'm Dan Wetzel, senior writer of ESPN, joined by Pete Thamel, all things ESPN, and Dave Clawson, veteran coach from Bowling Green and Wake Forest, works for ESPN and the ACC network. Quick reminder, download the podcast wherever you prefer to get your podcasts, or even better yet, subscribe and never miss an episode. Gentlemen, we're going to discuss who's winning and losing in the transfer portal, the expanded playoff proposals, and other developments in the sport, especially in the extended YouTube version and podcast format here. However, the title game is set Monday the 19th at Hard Rock Stadium. So let's start with that. And let's start with the quote-unquote home team, even though they're technically the visitors, Miami. Now, the Hurricanes are playing for the national title for the first time since 2002. They've won 5 overall. Their 2001 team, I just love talking about, considered the greatest team in college football history, at least by me. 38 NFL draft picks, 17 first-rounders. They had a tailback rotation of Clinton Portis, Willis McGahee, and Frank Gore. How'd you like that, Coach Clawson, trying to deal with that? Coach Mario Cristobal was an O-lineman on 2 previous Miami titles, and he is loath to answer one question. Is the U back? In my opinion, Mario's doing his own version of this. There will never be another 2001 or any of those 90s teams. So this isn't really about just getting all that kind of talent, but doing it in the trenches. And Coach, you coached against Miami for many years while you're at Wake Forest. You've been around them working at the ACC network. You know Mario Cristobal. What do you make of this run by the Hurricanes to the national title?
Well, I think Mario Cristobal has embraced coaching college football in 2025 and 26 as well as anybody in the country. He was always known as a top-notch recruiter. And I really think if you look at their football team this year, there was 2 key acquisitions. Number one, hiring Corey Heatherman as their defensive coordinator completely changed the culture of their defense. And then also bringing in Carson Beck. And if you look at Miami's season, it's really interesting. They got off to a hot start. They beat Notre Dame, South Florida, Florida State, and then had this mid-season lull that if the playoff was only 4 teams, they wouldn't even be in it. But then after the Syracuse game, it was one play in particular that I think in a lot of ways changed their whole season. But they are just so good up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And I really believe that's how Mario wanted to build his football team. But I don't know if he knew he had that at the beginning of the year. To me, they're playing much differently now than they did the first half of the season.
Dave, what was the play? You said there's one play that changed the whole season.
Well, they got off to that great start, and then they lost to Louisville. They beat Stanford, and then, they had a really bad loss at SMU. And they were really struggling against Syracuse. If you remember, that game was like a 0-0 low-scoring game late in the second quarter. And they kind of opened up the playbook. They ran a reverse with Malachi Toney, who threw it back to Carson Beck. Carson Beck runs into the end zone, does a finger roll, and the whole team just celebrates and gets excited. And to me, it was a way of like, we've got to make this fun again. And ever since that one football play, they have been on a roll. They've played as well as anybody in the country, with maybe the exception of Indiana, since that play. And I really think Shannon Dawson, I give him a lot of credit. He made it fun. He was putting in trick plays and doing different things with Malachi Toney and involving Carson Beck. And you could just tell like there was this almost weight off their shoulder that they made football fun again. And I really give Mario and Shannon a lot of credit for kind of like, hey, we've got to find a way to create some momentum and make this fun for the players.
Yeah, Dave, I completely agree with the identity shift. And I think from being around Miami last week out west and watching them in the playoffs, to me, the defining plays of Miami are Mark Fletcher going up the middle. He should get an NIL deal from Caterpillar because all he does is move piles of people. He turns 3-yard runs into 8-yard runs. There's these beehives of humans, and his legs are just churning through. Mario almost lost the molars out of his mouth. He was so excited on that 19-yard run that Fletcher, he gave one of those like big fist pumps and screamed. I just think that's what this team is. And it's going to be, we'll get into Indiana more. It's going to be fascinating because Indiana, without as much raw talent on each line, has whipped people up front. They whipped Oregon in Eugene up front with 6 sacks. They whipped them again up front in Atlanta the other night. So I really think that bulldozer mentality is going to meet an interesting match. And I give them credit. It's the way Mario wanted to play, right? Like what else? How else would Mario push them to want to play?
Yeah, and after last year, I mean, Pete, they weren't an average defense last year. They were bad. I mean, they blew coverages. They didn't run to the football. They didn't pursue things. And so when the year started, you think, okay, this is the Miami of 24. And instead of Cam Ward, it's Carson Beck. And they're going to be wide open and have to win games on offense. And I think about halfway through the year, they discovered, you know what? We're pretty good, damn good on defense too. And I always say that you have a great football team when you're capable of winning low-scoring games and high-scoring games. And Miami in this playoff run has been able to do both. They won low-scoring games against Texas A&M and Ohio State. And going into the Ole Miss game, I really thought the magic number for them was 30. If they could get to 30 points, they could win the game. And that's exactly what they did. They got to 31. So they're capable of winning both ways.
Yeah, the ability for them to score late.
Yeah, and that's because of their O-line. I mean, they wear people down. Now, the key in this game is, can they stay on the field enough and can they make enough first downs against a very good Indiana team that's great at defending the run in order for that to take place? You know, the time of possession against Ole Miss, they had the ball for over 40 minutes. And, you know, defensive lines, those guys aren't used to playing 40 minutes.
Obviously, it's a big upgrade having Dave on our podcast. You and I, Dan, just like watch highlights and guess at things. Dave actually studies the film. You mentioned Corey Heatherman. Yeah, it's actually supremely insightful.
I've noticed this Bain guy is pretty good. Like that's my extensive sense of mind. Man, he seems pretty fast, good. Yeah. Dave, what's up with that? Yeah, no, go ahead, Pete.
So you mentioned Corey Heatherman. He's had a pretty well, it wasn't a meteoric rise. He started at Fitchburg State, but the last 3 years he's moved up quickly. He was actually on staff for Curt Cignetti at JMU, left there to go to be Rutgers' linebacker coach, then went to Minnesota and then to Miami. He actually overlapped with Bryant Haynes, who's probably the favorite for the Broyles Award, who's Indiana's DC. Both those guys have been revelations. They really project as like very pivotal coaches in the future here. Can you give me two traits of Corey Heatherman's defense and how you've seen him stamp it, Dave, for the change from last year?
I don't know if it's a huge schematic change. I think the one thing you see in Miami right now is they're a better space tackling team. You know, they get the ball on the ground a lot better than they did a year ago. I think if you watch their film, their pursuit, the amount of gang tackles they have. So when a kid does miss a tackle, there's 5 other people running to the football. And the other thing that I think they do a great job of is Ruben Bain is what you call a poison. A poison was when you played another team that had an elite pass rusher that you had to do something. Slide the protection to him. Use a back to chip him. Use a tight end. Miami has 2 poisons. Messidor is a poison too.
Sure.
And what I think that Mario and Corey Heatherman have done an unbelievable job of is using those 2 guys to complement each other. That if you're going to slide it one way, the other guy has a one-on-one. And in the Ohio State game, the very first third down, Ohio State's right guard really struggled against Indiana in the championship game. And the very first third down, they lined those 2 guys up next to each other and ran a twist. And so like over the right guard, like they found the weak link. And I really think that got in Ohio State's head of like, okay, what are we going to do protection wise? Because then you can show an overload blitz away, which you then can't slide the protection to those two. In the very first snap, they lined those two guys up together, ran a twist, and the sack happened so fast. And now you're not just saying, okay, you got these two poisons, but where are they going to line them up? And the way that Corey will show blitzes to make sure that at least one of those guys has a one-on-one, to me, has really helped their secondary. Because if Miami has a weakness, it is the secondary. And until they got Keontae Scott back, that was probably the weakness of their football team. But because of Messidor, because of Reuben Bain, people don't get to hold on to the ball that long.
So Keontae Scott made arguably the biggest play of this playoff against Ohio State. Walk us through that play, Dave, from a coach's perspective. Was that a missed block by Jeremiah Smith? Was that great instincts by him? Like, how did you analyze that play?
Well, to me, it was all of the above. You study tendencies, and a lot of times when teams motion that tight end wide, it's to get the ball to your playmakers. So I'm sure that was a play that they rehearsed, and almost like when the Patriots won the Super Bowl against the Seahawks, as a defensive player, when you see that formation and that motion and there's a tendency, you start drooling. And it was also a mistake by Jeremiah Smith of Ohio State that as a perimeter blocker, you always have to stop the penetration and avoid disaster and then look to block to the perimeter. And he took that one step outside, anticipating that Keontae Scott was going to react to the screen. And boy, when that play happened, I was at field level for that. I was working for the ACC network that game. And the reaction from the Ohio State sideline was just devastating. And I just think that play ignited Miami, and it said, you know what, we can beat these guys. And from that point on, Ohio State was playing uphill.
Yeah, I don't think this is a team you want to be behind on, especially 2 touchdowns. So that was the pivotal. It was also kind of your old school Miami game-breaking play. That could have been Ed Reed with a pick six type thing, and echoes it back. We are going to be back right after this, talk about the Hoosiers. Welcome back to the College Game Day podcast. We're discussing the national championship game, and it is Indiana's turn. Gentlemen, they made a movie once, perhaps you heard of it, called Hoosiers. And in that movie, to calm the nerves of the underdog farm kids of Hickory High, Coach Gene Hackman, or Norman Dale was his character, takes a tape measure famously and measures the 10 feet at the rim at Hinkle Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, and the free throw line is the same. And now we have the Indiana football team, and this is absolutely nothing like that. Indiana is South Bend Central from the movie. I don't think they're scared of anything. I don't think they're scared of anybody. I don't think they care what the program's history is. I think they're going to walk out into Hard Rock Stadium, vaunted Miami's home stadium. Very well may have more Indiana fans there. And believe that not only do they belong, but they're the best team. And so my question for you, Coach Dave Clawson, is how? How did Curt Cignetti not just get IU here from a talent and scheme aspect, but get them here to where they believe they're the bully, which they are, in this fight?
Well, clearly he's done an unbelievable job, but I also think the transfer portal era, the NIL era, allows people to flip programs quicker. And the smart thing that he did is he brought in 13 players from JMU right away and a whole bunch of coaches that had been with him for over a decade. And so he didn't have to create a culture. He imported a culture. And when he would get up in front of the team and say something to the team, he had over 25 people in his program that could say, this is what he means. And so I'm not objective on this. I love seeing the success of coaches that have climbed the ladder. IUP, Elon, JMU. When a guy like Bob Chesney has success, when a guy like Lance Leipold has success. And I really believe now that because of NIL and the transfer portal, that all the best players aren't on 4 or 5 teams. Coaching now matters as much as it ever did. And when you're coaching at IUP and Elon, and there isn't a huge difference in talent, the details in the coaching matter. And so I think between importing a culture, being a great evaluator, and have a bunch of coaches that have had to outcoach people, I think those three things have allowed him to do what he's doing, which is just miraculous and so impressive.
Dan, Dave forgot someone on that list. He forgot Dave Clawson, who went from Fordham to Richmond to Bowling Green. Really, it's a trend. We have to call it what it is. Athletic directors are recognizing that coaches who are doing it at so-called lower levels bring a skill set now that is more valuable maybe than a coordinator skill set, right? Because they have had to manage, make decisions, be a general manager, if you will. Sig likes to say he's the GM of Indiana. Those leadership skills are more applicable than coordinator skills, which is game plan and play calling in those kinds of things. But what I want to know, Dave, is you kind of lived in the same corridor as Curt Cignetti, throughout your coaching career. And I don't have it all matched up, but I don't think you ever played him, but I'm sure you've run across him. What did you know of him before he told everyone to Google him?
Well, when he was at Elon, I would get an annual call from him every December and say, "This is what I need, Dave. Who do you have for me? Who can't play for you that can help me?" And I would always recommend 2 or 3 players that were buried on our depth chart that may have interest in transferring down a level. And he did the same thing at JMU. And I was always impressed with his detail. Tell me about him. Does he love football? What's his skill set? And it wasn't just this random general question of, who should I look at? As soon as I recommended a player, there was a series of 3 or 4 questions that would follow. And this is why they're having success. I do believe he's the GM, and I think he's an excellent evaluator. And I think he's great at creating a culture, because the first question he would ask me was always, does this guy love football? And if he didn't love football and there was any hesitation on that answer, I don't think he wanted anything to do with the young man.
It's really interesting. I saw a clip the other day by Urban Meyer, and Urban, I think, and Pete, you can answer too, but to me, covering the last 25 years of college football is probably the second or third, top 2 or 3 best coaches I've ever been around in terms of just coaching college football and building in that era. And he said that when NIL first came, he was 100% convinced the rich were going to get richer, and this was going to be terrible for the sport. And he's very vocal about it. I think a lot of coaches didn't, and maybe ADs didn't do a lot of studying of like economics and how money factors in the dispersion of talent. But he says now, he was absolutely wrong, to his credit. He says, look, this has been parity. The players are going all over. And I think this Indiana team has crystallized that concept better than anything else. But it's not just who's going to pay for this quarterback or this big name guy. It's that ability to find the chip on your shoulder guy that can help, the guy who didn't work out here, reading a situation, right? Well, maybe he just got sideways with his coordinator or his position coach and it didn't figure out. How much have you, when you talk to coaches, has what Cignetti done at Indiana, where this would be one of the least likely teams to ever get great, has changed how maybe everyone is looking at this sport?
Well, it's funny. When I first got to Wake Forest in December of 2013, we had the worst all-time winning percentage of any Power 4 program. And during our time here, the school we passed was Indiana, so we were second. And so I was very conscious of what our all-time losing record was and what Indiana's was. And so when we passed him, that wasn't exactly the lead-in my press conference, but there certainly was an internal celebration.
Yeah, it's good pride. 11 years, you did great work.
And that was, and so when he took that job, I was very aware of where they were, which makes it even more impressive. But I think now in college football, any team in the Power 4 can make a run, but it's an institutional choice to invest. And so if you have a huge fan base or a couple of billionaires and they believe that having a great college football program is central to the university athletic department. You can do it, but there's a high cost of admission. The stakes of poker are very high, and Indiana was willing to make that commitment. But there's a lot of people that have made that commitment without the same results because the coaching and the evaluation, the alignment still matter. And that's a great example of a school that said, we're all in. They hired the right person with the right skill set. And even with that, I don't think anybody could have imagined what they're doing. I mean, this is one of the best coaching jobs, I don't know, over the past, since college football started. Nobody saw this. And the way they play, you just, as a coach, I admire it. They play hard, they're physical, they can run the football, they can defend a run, they take care of the football. I mean, their turnover margin's plus 21. That doesn't just happen, that's coached.
And I think one of the things that's going to really impact this game, and one of the reasons that I'm going to lean Indiana in this game, is if I had to distill it to one statistic, it's fewest penalty yards per game. Indiana, number 2 behind Army, who always leads the country in this, and should, by the way. Like, that's just good for America. Indiana's number 2 in the country. They average 26 penalty yards a game. Miami is number 103 in the country right now, and we've seen them really have some punitive penalty games here.
I like it when Army wins the riflery championship. I always feel a little better.
Miami's actually 84 in the country. They're 103 I think that's penalties per game. This is penalty yards per game. I'm at they're number 84 in the country. And look, Miami's had some big penalty games. They had 13 penalties against Florida State. They had 12 in that loss to SMU. They had 10 the other night in the in the Fiesta Bowl, which they won in the last 20 seconds. So, and then I believe they had 0 against Ohio State. So to talk about just, again, there's a lot of things that go into that. I'm sure Dave could talk for hours about officiating in the dynamics of it. But I do think Miami cannot hurt themselves. If Miami has punitive penalties that hurt themselves, they are not going to win this football game.
Well, it's funny, Pete, we don't have a national officials organization. And so when you get into the playoffs and you have a neutral crew, the way the Big Ten calls a game is much different than the way the ACC calls a game. And so whenever we played in bowl games, we would always research the crew. And if we had a Big Ten officiating crew, we knew we could get away with holding that week. They don't call holding in the Big Ten. But boy, they call pass interference. And whereas in the ACC, they do call holding, but as a receiver, you could push off and catch a ball and it would never get called. And, that's, again, there's a lot of issues with college football. If I was king for a day, we'd have a national officiating organization so everybody was trained the same way. But for a team like Miami, the other night they had a Big Ten crew. And for a team that likes to bully you, I think who the officials were certainly helped Miami.
Fascinating.
I'm looking to see who's officiating the national title.
No, I don't think we know
That's...
yet. Yeah, we do not know that, but there's your little tip.
I would guess it would be a Big 12 crew because they were out of it.
Well, I really miss the Pac-12 in so many ways for the sport. That's a whole other podcast. I don't miss their officials, however, because they would end up in these spots sometimes because they weren't in the title game. And you'd just be like, no, like all the memes and the calls into the booth. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they'd also ruin Pac-12 after dark.
Well, at least when the Pac-12 was a neutral crew, their commissioner wouldn't get involved in those calls.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. It's another story for another day. All right, we'll be right back after this with some game picks. All right, welcome back to the College Game Day podcast. We're about to make our selections for the national championship game between Indiana and Miami. And there's a little bit of interest in this game, in attending it. Obviously, you have the game played at Miami's home stadium, Hard Rock Stadium in South Florida. And then you have Indiana, which is either has the most living alums or is second or something. There seems to be a debate. Schools are are trying to tally up. They're running censuses to see who has got the most living alums. But Indiana's close, and they are desperate to go. Get-in rate as we speak, $3,974 for a ticket. And if you want to get close to the field and get the best ticket in this isn't even the suite, $11,436. So I expect to see Coach Dave Clawson and Pete Thamel sitting in the $11,000 seats. There you go. But anyway,
well,
this is
I'll be in Bristol doing they're bringing back the coach's film room this year.
Oh, awesome. So, what's that like to do, Dave? Is that fun?
Oh, it's a blast. It is, you're sitting around a table talking football with football people. And I did it 2 other times, the 2018 Clemson-Notre Dame game and the national championship game between Ohio State and Alabama. And it flies by, and it is fun. And hopefully because I just plugged it, that'll take viewership away from ABC and put it on ESPN2 or you.
Do you try to be Romo? Do you try to call the play? Is that a temptation to because you don't always call the play and be wrong. Oh, they're going to run a sweep here, and then they run a reverse or something.
Well, there's certain things that they'll do, whether it's a shift or a motion, and you'll see how the defense reacts, and you can predict the bubble screen, or you're going to predict that they're going to run it. And if you're smart, you make that prediction just as the play starts, so it looks like you really know what you're talking about.
I'm going to say this about the crowd quickly, Dan, because I was curious. Everyone's saying, oh, it's a home field advantage for Miami. Now, Miami a lot of times doesn't even have home field advantage in its own stadium. Did you play there, Dave, in front of some pretty empty crowds over the years?
So what was wild, Pete, is I was a head coach at Wake Forest for 11 years, and I never, ever coached against Miami until my 11th year. And we played down there my last year against Cam Ward, and it was a friends and family crowd. So it was, it's funny. I've said to some other people that, I was at the Cotton Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl, and I saw more Miami fans at those 2 games than I saw them when we played them at their home stadium. That crowd was louder there than it was in a home game.
There's been a lot of people you meet now in the last month that are all of a sudden Miami fans. You're like, oh, you were a Miami fan. Hadn't heard from you in about 20 years. Indiana football too. So double bandwagon. Go ahead, Pete. What were you going to say?
Yeah. Ticket allotment, $20,000 for each school, and the remaining $25,000 are sold in packages, corporate stuff, whatever. So I say that to say, I don't think anyone's going to have a significant home field advantage. And Dan, you've obviously covered every big event in American history, Super Bowls, World Series, whatever. When you get to these highest levels, the crowd does become a little corporate. So you're going to have 20,000 hardcore each, and those aren't going to move, right? Miami fans, if you're in that 20,000 allotment, you're not going to put your tickets on the open price. Some will, but for the most part, that 20,000 each isn't going to swing significantly. And then you've got to invade the 25,000 corporate seats, which is hard to do. So I would predict a pretty even split from talking to people who've been around these games in terms of the crowd. I don't think anyone's going to have an advantage. Indiana, I can't overstate, had an unbelievable home field advantage in Atlanta there. I don't know how that showed on TV, Dan, but it was massive. Oregon had to go silent count. It was unbelievable.
Well, I think Indiana fans knew spend your money now and not wait because, again, it is hard to get these tickets. It's extremely pricey, obviously. So you're looking at a $10,000, $20,000 trip to go to this game. I've never seen a Super Bowl or anything like that that's had a real home field advantage. It just doesn't really materialize. So I would not, and these national title games never do either. Both teams show up no matter who you are. And they'll show up on this one. So Indiana opened as a 7.5-point favorite. They're now an 8.5-point favorite, despite the game being played at Miami. Who's going to win?
Yeah, I'm going to take Indiana. Now, if you look back at my preseason predictions, they're like the comic book pages, like most people's in this sport. And that's what makes it wonderful. But I've been a believer in Indiana. I picked them to go to the playoff to start the season. They are just relentless efficiency monsters that don't stop. And I feel like they have the best quarterback, and their lines can hold up enough against Miami. I think they will cover. I do think it will be a close game throughout. I think this is going to be like a 30-20 kind of game, and it'll be Sig's world. We're just living in it.
Well, I am employed by the ACC network. And America is known for anything. It's pocketbook voting. So,
what do you really think, Dave? I don't think it's going to.
It doesn't sound like an endorsement of it.
Well, here, every pick I've made this year in these games, like I really thought, Miami was the better team, so I picked Ole Miss. I did not think Miami would beat Ohio State. I did not think Ole Miss would beat Georgia. So every time I have a gut about the way the game's going to go, it goes the opposite way. I really do believe, though, that Miami is the more talented football team. I think they are at home. And in 2025, nothing that we expected to happen in college football happened. And it's just been one of those contrarian years. And I know what Miami's capable of. I think they're at home. And I don't know. As everyone expects Indiana to win, and almost because of that, I'm going to pick Miami because I just think they have a lot of things going for them. And if they play the game that they're capable of, they can win this football game. Now, very few times have they done it, but they also have the extra day of rest. They don't have to travel. There's a lot of intangible things that are to their advantage. And so I'm going to go with the Canes.
So everything, you look at the stats, you look at the way the teams have performed, you look at the moment, everything says pick Indiana, which is why they're the heavy favorites here. But I am actually going to go with Miami. And also because I don't gamble. So I'll get roasted in some comment sections if I'm wrong, but whatever. I'm always a believer in the defensive and offensive lines. And I don't think that Indiana, as good as they have been, and they may handle this fine, but they haven't dealt with Akeem Mesidor. They haven't dealt with Ruben Bain Jr. There's going to be pressure on Fernando Mendoza that wasn't there against Oregon or any of the other games, or certainly Alabama. And so, and then I think that if they can run the ball, again, these are ifs, but you can grind clock, you can get Fletcher going. If they can avoid the bad penalties and they can get something good out of Carson Beck, I think Miami can spring this upset and do this. But that is a very tempered bit of support. There's a lot of ifs there. If you want to go with the safer, less ifs, I would pick Indiana. But I just think if you got that defensive line, I'm going to take the Canes in this one to win it. So we will see. We'll see what happens. So one of the big bits of news that's going to happen beyond just this title game is the leaders of college athletics will all gather, a council of the elders type thing they'll have down there at the championship game, and they will determine perhaps the future of this playoff, which is now 2 years into its current 12-team format, albeit with some tweaks after year one. ESPN's Heather Dinich reporting some of the decision-making that'll go on here, the structural decisions. And there are two main proposals out there that could happen. One is a 16-team field, expanding to 16 teams, keeping 5 conference champions, and 11 at large, because I don't know why. I guess they looked at this 12-team field and watched a number of non-competitive games and said, we need more teams in. There is another backed by the Big Ten for a 24-team playoff. And there's been previous proposals with the Big Ten that keep 4 automatic bids for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC, 2 for the Big 12, and 2 for the ACC. If you extract that out into the way they would set up conference championship weekend, apparently they would get rid of, if they kept that, there would really be a 30-team playoff. If they eliminate conference championship weekend, because that's just a lot of games, you'd go to 24 and switch the calendar up there. So there's a lot of fluidness. Heather reports that the Big Ten is willing to go with the 16-team playoff if the SEC, which is in favor of that, agrees to go to 24 after 2 or 3 years. That seems to be some dispute. There's side bits of, do we have some kind of CFP ranking category that a team must meet? so that a 25th ranked James Madison doesn't get in? Do you have to be in the top 20? Do you have to be in the top 16, even if you win your conference championship, to try to avoid that? There's a lot of tweaks. A lot is going to happen. If they cannot agree, we're going to have another year of the 12-team playoff, which I would prefer. I am a big favor of letting this cook and seeing where we're at. Every year we learn a little something that goes on that maybe we can improve. But I'll start with Pete. What do you think? What do you think of this big deal? I mean, these decisions. I mean, if you go to 2014 playoff, this sport has dramatically altered. Like, it's a totally different sport next year. So, like, these are the things that really matter beyond mattering to Indiana. You know, this is an off-field decision that really matters.
Well, first, Dan, I want to say welcome back, because that actually sounded like you, not you trying to like host an ESPN2 show about like an intense micro game breakdown.
I was channeling my Reese Davis. Smooth. The hair. I was doing my best.
This is like cynical guardrail references. Like, oh, these leaders don't know anything. Like the tone immediately came back. You were like, before you were like, Miami's comeback from 2002. Now you're just like, these guys are all idiots, and you feel a lot more at home. This is like you just pulled up to the bar stool after being in there. So this is pretty, to me, Dan, pretty simply distilled as a standoff, right? Like, the one thing about the CFP now is two opinions matter. The Big Ten matters and the SEC matters. Nobody else matters at all. So what those two want is going to happen, and those two are at they're in different positions right now, as Heather reported. Tony Petitti wants to go to 24, and I understand why he does, and Greg Sankey wants to go to 16, and I understand why he does too. The interesting pressure that's driving this to me, Dan,
why do each one want to go to those?
Well, Tony Petitti, remember, he was on an AQ binge for a while. He wanted automatic qualifiers. He views the consumption of the sport through the prism of a guy who worked in TV. He's a very smart TV guy, and the NFL. So he wants the mid-October, mid-November Big Ten games, the Illinois-Minnesota game, to have wild card type stakes, like 7-7 Patriots Dolphins playing in mid-November. That's the
dream. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah, you're back, Dan. So that has sort of always been what he has said out loud as the driver. And look, he has an 18-team league. So you lobby from what you bid in poker based on what cards you have, right? And his cards are an 18-team league. That's a really big league, all right? Yeah. His cards have also gotten a little better now because, the Big Ten is heavily favored to win the national championship for the third consecutive year. The SEC for the third consecutive year is not in the national championship. The SEC stunk during bowl season. There's no other way to say it. I think it was 2-7 against other power conference leagues. Is that the right is that the right number? So again, the SEC is really good. I'm not going to sit here and pick partisan sides on all that stuff. The SEC is an excellent league. It's a deep league. It simply has not performed. Like, the results in the highest end in bowl season and in the CFP, it is they have not equaled where the Big Ten is right now. So. And I think that we're at an interesting inflection point in this. And we saw it in the hiring firing cycle. I think 35 jobs changed hands. Everybody's putting in some number in the power conference between 15 and 40 million, right? And we could talk about MMR and all that nonsense, but it's a big, and now that people are in and they are paying the players, the pressure on the coaches has gone up exponentially. And so the conversation about playoff creep, Dan, that we've seen is based in the fact of, like, if all our schools in our league, and this is a little bit of the Big Ten perspective, are putting this much money in, we need to incentivize them with playoff spots. Because if you don't make playoff, you're getting fired, just like James Franklin just got fired. So the SEC has been more pragmatic. I think there's some resonance there of let's preserve the regular season. I mean, look, college football is the best regular season. I don't think there's any doubt in any major American sport. College football's regular season there's a lot of flaws in college football. We talk about them all the time. Regular season is pretty darn good, and the games mean a lot. And so it doesn't feel like from the SEC side there's a huge appetite to go beyond 16. It's really generally a non-starter. And what my understanding is, Petitti's broker said, hey, we'll go to 16 as the SEC wants. Petitti does not want the committee to have say for such a big at-large pool, doesn't trust it. The SEC wants to take one step of growth, but doesn't want any more. So it's a standoff right now. I think I distilled it the best way I could. Dave, what do you think about the future of the playoff here? And I'd be curious, just from someone who worked at a have-not. I don't think you're going to take offense to that as the former Wake Forest coach. How do you feel about playoff size?
Well, I think there's a lot of conflicting forces that a lot of people making these decisions have never played or coached college football. And so you're now adding games. And even at 12 teams, a college football team can potentially play 17 games, which is an NFL season. And at the same time, because of the House case, you're now reducing rosters. And so just talking to Mario Cristobal after the Fiesta Bowl win, all he could talk about is how exhausted and tired his football team is because they just had to play 5 straight games on the road. And then you look at the Oregon-Indiana game last week. Oregon had to move 2 defensive players to running back to play a playoff game. And this isn't the NFL. You can't pick somebody off of free agency or off of somebody else's practice squad to sign late to make your playoff run. And, if you go to 24 teams, you're now looking potentially at an 18 or maybe even a 19 game season. And so, you want teams playing their best football late in the year, and the NFL is able to do that. And so I just think you get a little bit of a breaking point that you can't keep adding games and at the same time reducing rosters if the school is still based around an academic calendar. So I just think, yes, it's made it more interesting. There's more teams involved, but I feel bad for Oregon. Like right now, Dan Lanning and Oregon's getting killed and criticized for their performance against Indiana. But, where was their ability to pick up 3 free agents at running back so they could play that game more competitively? And it just, again, as coaches, and that's where my background is, we have no input on this whole thing. And so, great. There's a lot of money coming in. It's never been more popular. But why are we shrinking rosters when we're expanding games?
Can I make a quick point to double that, Dan? Just in terms of the title game, we did talk about this in the breakdown, but Miami is just as fragile at defensive back right now. And Dave, you were obviously at that game and you saw it happen in real time. So Xavier Lucas gets thrown out. He's going to miss the first half of the title game. OJ Frederick, who's a corner, only played 6 snaps. He had been banged up, was supposed to be back healthy, didn't fire, and didn't play a ton. Damari Brown, another corner, didn't play in that game. So they had a true freshman out there. Correct, Dave? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
With the season on the line, they got a true freshman out there, covering Ole Miss receivers, trying to close the game. So it's just it's indicative. You mentioned the Oregon running back. At this point, if you play this many games with this roster size and no ability to replenish, you're going to have some position rooms that are just completely gutted.
Yeah, and even the long run that Ole Miss gave up. Bryce Fitzgerald, who's a freshman safety for Miami, who's I think going to be a great player and had 2 picks against Texas A&M. He's primarily been a nickel guy for them. And he appeared he misfit the run that allowed Lacey's 73-yard run.
Oh, wow.
And you get to the playoffs and you want to be playing your best with your best players. And some of these coaches are just holding on for dear life.
Yeah, I think it's a completely under-discussed issue. It even happens in the NFL. You have to use guys you're signing off the street late in the season. And now those guys are a little more talented because they're still pros, but it is a mess. And as you get a bigger roster, there's certain programs that, you've still got a measure of depth. But you start going 24 teams deep. Though you're not getting Ohio State in multiple games or Texas or whatever. What I'm saying is it's even going to be more of an issue. I prefer the 12.
Can I interject a quick line there, Dan? I had a buddy who went from college to the NFL, and I saw him at the combine. I said, "Hey, what's the thing that surprised you most about the NFL?" He said people at home have no idea how many guys are working at Gold's Gym on Monday, start at nickel on Sunday. And it was like, it was just one of those things that you know it, but you don't know it, if that makes sense. I was just thought that was fascinating.
No, guys coming off the street 2 weeks later. Yeah.
Yeah. And the NFL game is much shorter than the college game because of the clock rules. So for the college game, the clock rules and there's more plays. So there's more wear and tear on sometimes 17, 18, 19-year-old kids who aren't fully developed. So that was always the pushback from the coaches. If you're going to add games, don't cut the roster.
You also take things like them this season, we'll go into the year ahead, but Miami, Notre Dame had a massive impact on week 1. It basically determined which one of those two teams is going to get in this playoff. And there's still great value there. I have not looked at the playoff and said, boy, there are so many more teams that should get in. Should Notre Dame have gotten in this year? Sure. There was a quirk with this ACC tiebreaker that didn't work out really well. They should have gotten in, but these are tweaks. So I'm just suspicious of anyone trying to just completely overhaul the sport and go 24 teams deep when we haven't even had a chance with the 12. And other than I might get a little more TV revenue or I might get a little more excitement on some mid-season game, it's a really hard sell. And it's part of the reason why the Big Ten isn't out there really selling it publicly and going on that.
The only thing I'd say real quick, Dan, is I don't know how much of a reward a bye is. The bye week teams now after 2 years are 1-7. And I think if you ask those coaches, they probably would have preferred playing the 16 seed, the 15 seed, the 14 seed, rather than have 24 days off of not playing football. So I think the adjustment to 16 wouldn't have that great of an impact. And for some of the better teams, they may prefer that.
Well, I wrote a whole book about a 16-team playoff many years ago, and that was part of my thing. You'd be rewarded by just playing a weaker team. You get a reward. I agree. Getting rid of conference championship games, I'd be in favor of. Speeding up the schedule. They talk about, maybe you work the playoff even around the Army-Navy game. Army-Navy, put it in its own window. There's many, many things that can be done before you just sit there and say 24. If coaches think that getting in the playoff as 24 teams is going to be job security, it isn't. It isn't. You're going to be expected to make long runs and all that. So this is my guess is there's a stalemate, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Well, it does speak to the many macro issues that you and I have talked about on multiple podcasts now, Dan, where we just can't wait and see if something works. Something happens. There's a glitch in the system, like you mentioned with Notre Dame or whatever. And then it's like, we need to change it. We need to change it.
Right.
We need to change it. And it's like everything's microwaved and there's nothing slow cooked. And yeah, I don't have a super conviction, 12, 16, whatever, but I do just think I've observed 22 years into this thing now, just like knee jerk. And that's just not a way to run an organization, right? It's just like something happens. Somebody's pissed. They throw a fit. Let's change it. Right. Like, I don't know how many off seasons we've had where there hasn't been change to postseason in some way. Is it the computer formula? Is it the selection committee? Do we need to, and it's like, let's just like let it bake a little bit.
Everything is an existential threat. Everything is unsustainable. Everything is over. It's this huge, everything is we're doomed. No offense, Dave, but the coaching peers, these are complainers, man. They love to complain. And everybody got screwed and everyone's getting cheated. And it's just like, here we go. And so, you need
no offense, Dan. It's only what I did for 36 years.
Us in the media are so well adjusted and just incredible people. We're terrible. So but not you, but there's a lot of like, this is outrageous. How can we have a playoff if we're not in? No, I'm only kidding.
No, I mean, it's pocketbook voting, Pete, like, especially in the ACC, that we're the most diverse conference in terms of private academic schools, large state land grant universities. It was really, really hard in our group to ever have a consensus because let's face it, what's best for, Clemson and Florida State and North Carolina wasn't exactly the best for Syracuse, BC, and Wake Forest. And as much as you want to get together and say, we're a conference, let's do what's best for the conference, when you're a coach or an AD, you feel like you're working or coaching for your job every single day of the week.
Clemson and Florida State wanted more money if you had success. I'm sure they're excited that Miami's earned about 20 million.
Miami is thanking them for it. They were the ones that stayed out of the lawsuit. And I told Mario the other day after the game, he was on the ACC network. And I said, your president's over there. Tell him you just made him an extra $6 million.
So I want to talk a little bit of portal. And there's a million stories. We'll get to many of them in the offseason on this podcast. But over the weekend, Texas had a big weekend in the portal. They landed Cam Coleman, the wide receiver out of Auburn, who is considered the best wide receiver in the portal, I believe, to give Arch Manning a bit. They also flipped a portal commit. This is great stuff now. I know they had a new one. From Alabama, Hollywood Smothers, one of my favorite names, because I used to work in Hollywood, and it will smother you. I can tell you. I don't think that was he knew quite, but Hollywood Smothers was almost 1,000-yard back at NC State this year. He had previously been at Oklahoma, goes to NC State, then he commits to Alabama. Alabama had this anemic run game, and then Texas came in and swooped him out of the end. So there's two angles on this. We'll start with Texas. They are loading up. They aren't the only ones. I hear you, Texas A&M. They got a whole bunch of offensive linemen, and they're doing great also in other schools. Oklahoma's feeling good. But are we going to have an offseason where it's preseason number one? Texas again, Arch Manning, Heisman. Look at all these weapons. What do we got, Pete?
Yeah, well, Texas had been fairly quiet in the in the portal, Dan. Remember, they lost Parker Livingstone, who was an excellent young wide receiver for them, redshirt freshman, who of course crossed the Red River and ended up at Oklahoma. Look, are we kidding? Is it going to be another offseason of arch inevitability? Absolutely. Should they be preseason number one? Absolutely not. Their offensive line stunk last year and they couldn't run the ball. So no, but is that going to affect how many magazine covers Arch is on? Probably not. Do they even make magazines anymore? Other than our friend Phil Steele. But I do think Texas should always be in position. I think this was a big win for Texas, Dan, to get Cam Coleman, because Texas Tech was there. And Texas Tech financially, Texas no longer has, they may have a brand trump card and a league trump card on Texas Tech, but they don't necessarily have a financial trump card. And that's the first time in history, because of Cody Campbell, that's happened. So I think that was a pretty interesting inflection point for Texas to get this high-profile guy who went for a significant amount of money. Now, these monies, the actual numbers tend to get gotted up and buried and all that stuff. But it was Cam Coleman is going to be projected as the most expensive position player in the portal. Keywan Lacey maybe in the conversation too, just because of the unique nature of Ole Miss and LSU. So no, for Texas, it was big, and they didn't have any tailbacks. They now have two with Rayleigh Brown and obviously the completely wonderfully named Hollywood Smothers, who's a really good back. And I'm sure Dave knows a little bit about him from NC State. And then obviously they were not stout at receiver. Ryan Wingo has been just okay for them. So yeah, Cam Coleman's a magician.
Yeah, I just think this goes to show the importance of why the market for quarterbacks is so high. And Texas had the advantage of having a quarterback already in-house. Because when you're trying to recruit skilled players, whether it's receivers or running backs, one of the first things they want to know is who's the quarterback. Because if you're a running back and you don't have a good quarterback, you're going to get outnumbered boxes. It's going to be hard to run the football. And clearly, if you're a receiver, you want to know there's somebody there that can get you the football. And, with the way Arch Manning played down the stretch, I think if you're a wide receiver, he's a very attractive option to play with. And, and that's why the portal bidding for quarterbacks is getting so high, because until you have that guy, it's really hard to recruit other players and get other portal players.
How good's Hollywood, Dave?
He's excellent. Again, NC State, I watched every game this year, and he's a really, really good player. Now, NC State has a really good quarterback in CJ Bailey. They had a really good tight end in Justin Joly. And because they could throw the ball and they had a quarterback who could run, he had some very favorable surfaces to run the ball with. But he's elite. He can hit a home run. He can make you miss in tight spaces, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield.
Let me spin this to the Alabama side, and this is just one player that they're losing, but there's a lot of consternation around Alabama right now, and I mean Texas. They played a men's basketball game against Alabama, and they defeated them over the weekend, and then they literally send out a social media post, like kind of with it's like a handshake emoji with Texas football, like they had both beaten Alabama this weekend. They have Keelan Russell as their star quarterback, but they don't have a returning. I don't know whether that plays a role. Alabama fans are coming to the realization they don't have as much money as some of these schools, and they don't have that inevitability where you just stockpile players anymore. Dave, should we all feel bad for poor little Alabama? Or is this just reality striking that nobody is really safe in this era?
Oh, my heart bleeds for them, Dan, especially since they took one of our starting corners right before the 24 season into Deshaun Jones. No, and Kalen DeBoer is another guy that came up through the levels, and he's an excellent football coach. But these brands no longer have the same advantage they had. And, every job in college football is tough. But it's no longer, you can't stockpile players. And, quite honestly, I think at the beginning of it, there was a lot of people that were willing to go to Alabama for less so they can play for Nick Saban. And I don't think they're enjoying that discount as much anymore from what I can tell in the market.
So when you look at Alabama right now through the through the prism of where everything is, I really think Keelan Russell is going to be spectacular there. Like I am very optimistic and bullish. But from 30,000 feet, Dan, Nick Saban left at the perfect time, man. Like you cannot win ever. No one will ever win the way he won in college football because the rules changed. I mean, for all of the things he did at an elite level, he could not have picked and timed a better exit. Just because he would stockpile talent, and the redshirt sophomore would start and then go to the draft the next year, and it was just like he had a machine running. You can't run machines like that anymore because the redshirt sophomore, after his freshman year, says I want to play, and he goes to Arkansas, and that's just the way the world has changed, and Alabama is like everybody else.
I'm impressed with like some of the, it's not just like a Texas Tech and things all over, but even just within the league, like Kentucky's got a really good group coming in out of the portal. We'll see how all this stuff works. And a lot of stuff, again, the portal rated. And then to Dave's point, like Cignetti figured out this guy wants to do it and this guy wants to do it. What's the right guy? But it is a fascinating bit. Oklahoma State's bringing a ton of guys in, Penn State. Like you can reboot a team really quickly, but it's just a totally different sport. But there's a lot of SEC in these top portal rankings so far, and it goes now. Is all deals not complete until the final day of the portal? How does that? Is it there's still flips, or is this basically what you sign? Like, is there a sign? How does this conclude? Because I think there's some schools nervous that someone's still going to flip. Pete.
Well, if you sign, in theory anyway, you should have to, honor the contract. I don't think when the portal ends, and Dave, you would know this, like you can't sign like the portal being open is just to enter. It's not to exit. You can still pick a school later.
Yeah, there's players that enter that still, if they're in their last semester and they're close to graduation, they will stay at their previous institution and graduate, and then, go somewhere else in the summer. And so, the portal is the last day you can enter it is the 16th, but you can stay in the portal for as long as you want. And that's where some players will end up without places to go.
Did you see the really big news, Pete? You've been giving me some, grief about my donations to the University of Massachusetts, my alma mater, and I drank that UMass NIL beer. I got that Massachusetts lager, and then days later, UMass lands Pop Watson, the Virginia Tech quarterback. in the transfer portal. That's an A to B thing. Don't you believe? Don't you believe I'm
direct correlation, huh?
direct
Pop
correlation.
Watson's a good player, man. Yeah, Springfield Central
good
High.
beer.
Let's go, Pop.
Good beer, good player.
No.
We're on our way.
Yeah.
So if you're not
nowhere to go but up, Dan. Nowhere to go but up.
You're not Cody Campbell out there. Just drink the beer. Everyone's got a beer, a tequila, a whiskey, right, Dave? That's really the solution here.
Oh, Dan, I was coaching at Richmond back in the days when UMass was winning national championships at the FCS level. So
yeah, well, that was where the
they
level
had a lot of
good
good players, and they had some pros that in today's day and age they'd be transferring to Texas Tech.
Yeah. All right. That is the College Game Day podcast. We appreciate everyone who maybe picked us up off the TV. My Anchorman performance on hosting a television show. Do I get the Scotchy after that? But we'll be back after the national championship game with a full breakdown and all the other bit. We thank Coach Dave Clawson for visiting with us today and providing some actual football intelligence. And remember to download us wherever you get your podcasts, or even better yet, to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. We will talk to you later.